Thank you for joining us, first of all, and we'll start with what was the main reason for you to attend the FOAM event?
Well, first of all, the subject, obsolescence management, is really something which is very important in my business. It's actually the second time I come to FOAM. I came here 2 years ago already, and I found very interesting presentations that were held during this event. For me, the FOAM is really a very nice opportunity for networking and to exchange on this topic. It's really a plus. It makes me think out of the box because I have new inputs, new perspective of seeing the problem, and that's something which is very interesting in FOAM.
Thanks. What do you see as the biggest threat for the security of the supply chain?
At the present time, the political instability in Asia, in Middle East, something that we don't talk about a lot is the growing protests in China that induced strikes. And when we know how many things we're sourcing from China, it's a concern, even if it's quite contained by the government, Chinese government. And last but not least is also natural hazards and disasters that are occurring more and more often due to the global warming probably. This is a real concern because when you see the problems we are encountering to recover from that after the last floods or the tsunami, it's really critical.
Yeah. So this leads directly to the risk of dealing with open market. So what would you think is the best practice to work effectively with the open market?
Best is difficult to say, honestly. Of course, the best way is to avoid to go to the open market, and the key word there is to anticipate as much as possible the cases. And, but I would say when you have to deal with the open market, the key word is to try to avoid counterfeiting. And in my business, Megit is actually building devices for aircraft, for aerospace, for military application, and also for energy market. And these devices are involved in the safety of the global product. That means that we cannot afford to have counterfeit parts or even bad parts, because one of the problems with sourcing with the open market is that first you have to avoid counterfeited parts, but you can have original parts, but which have not been let's say maintained properly, and that is causing problem maybe in 1-2 months later. So we involve reliability there.
Yeah.
And that's really critical for a business like ours, because it's first involve our responsibility, and as I said, it's safety. You know, when you're taking the plane, you expect to land safe afterward.
So can you describe your policy when it comes to dealing with the open market?
We have a clear procedure when we have shortage or a problem with obsolete parts. We have a clear procedure for that. We're going through a clear process. And when we are dealing with the open markets, let's say that we define that first of all we reduce as much as possible the portfolio of the partners on the open market, because it makes no sense to have a lot of them. Plus, I won't go in details about the commercial aspects, but if you ask six brokers, or to use the term, of course the price will increase, because most of the time they're going at the same place. And the seller is not stupid, you know. But that's not the only thing. Is what is very important when we deal with the open market is that we have confidence in the partner. That's essential. How to get confidence in such a market? Because your partner can be really honest and try to find the best source on the market. Still, you don't know how is the supplier, you know?
Yeah.
So what we based our confidence on is, of course, the experience that we had in the past, the reputation of the partner, because this is very important. So we never deal with small companies. What I'm looking at especially is that they have certifications, because it's not a waterproof system, but it's still something that proves that their ability to manage the supply chain, to manage the parts, to do counterfeit tests in case. And also I try to use as much as I can the networking to collect also the experience from my colleagues. And companies like Converge, for example, which belong to a big group like Harrow, it's giving also some additional point, I would say, because Converge is implicating also Harrow in its way of working, and there is a more global supply chain knowledge, which is very interesting in that case.
That led me exactly to the next question. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for OEMs to improve their sourcing and avoiding this risk of counterfeit or quality issues whatsoever?
Again, the best way to improve that is actually to avoid it. And what is important, I would say, is to anticipate as soon as possible the problems. This is very difficult. This is very, very difficult. We can still anticipate with the tools we have available right now, and I expect that even in the future we'll get more and more tools that will help us to identify in advance the risk of an obsolescence. The only case which is very tricky, at least for the industry in which I am, is that you're dealing with the open market not only for, I would say, an obsolescence which is occurring like that, but also in the case that you didn't predict how many parts you needed. So you do a last time buy. You buy 10,000 pieces, assuming that these 10,000 pieces will cover the complete lifetime of your product. But sometimes, and unfortunately too many times, too often, it's not enough. And then after 6 years after the LTB, you still have to find parts. And in that case, you cannot avoid it. But it's a double pain, because usually when you discover that, you need a part very quickly. And when we go through this process, we need to, as we don't have the traceability, we absolutely need to do through a very heavy tests before we accept the parts, and this takes time.
Of course. How do you see the future of obsolescence? What would be your fears and hopes?
The fears is that I do expect that the merge and acquisition are increasing, and my fear is that from that we'll have more and more obsolescence. That's what was presented actually today, and that comfort me in this idea. And what I'm afraid of is that we'll get less and less sources, so it will be more and more difficult to find alternatives, because you will get only one product, because you have less and less manufacturers. And the other thing is, what I expect also in the future is that a lot of manufacturers will go fabless. So they're asking more and more founders to produce their components. And by doing that, that means that we're reducing the number of fabs in the world. So when there is a catastrophe, like a flood, like an earthquake, or whatever, if it impacts one founder, it impacts a huge amount of components. And you have a real crack on the business. Because we are actually going to a situation when we'll have a monopolistic market. And this is very dangerous for us, very dangerous.
Yeah, thank you.
My hope would be that we have tools more and more powerful to predict the obsolescence and to find alternatives. And the other thing is, I see that a lot of new design to identify the origin and the integrity of different products. And I'm not talking now about the components, but I think it's possible also to do that. And I hope that in the future we'll have embedded system in the chip that allow us to identify clearly which product it is and how it has been maintained. That would be the real future. That's my hope, actually. We, as OEMs, really have to be more flexible and agile. And obsolescence, it's not anymore, if it was in the past, I'm not sure, but it's not anymore something that we have to take as a small activity in the industry. And what I'm trying to already promote at Megit is that we really need to have a workforce in the company dedicated to obsolescence, because it's not only it's a complete process flow that has to be put in place. It's not only to say we have a nice tool, we have a team who's working on obsolescence, analyzing the PCNs, the lifetime, helping the designers to choose the correct components. It's not only this. It's when you have a PCN and you need to redesign something and to test also, because you can choose a component but you don't know how it will behave in your application, so you need to run tests afterward. And for that, what we see, and it's not specific to Megit, is that you're trying to get someone who can do the test because they're busy on something else, on a new design, on an upscreen, on a whatever. And counterfeiting or working on PCM is still considered secondary, and it's not.
Exactly.
It's not.
Exactly. Many times we've seen that this responsibility of buying obsolete parts falling on the buyer shoulders. What do you think should be the role of the highest management when it comes to obsolete?
I would say that the higher management has to consider the business cases. They don't have the expertise at all about the risk. What they see is a profit and the cost mainly. So the only thing they take in account is a business case. And they don't really decide unless we're talking about a real strategy impact on the business, because that can go very high. I think that the higher management should look more in details about this obsolescence, in the sense that it should integrate that to the sales strategy, how long they want to sell a product, and how can we maintain this product. That's what the higher management should take care of.
Yeah.
I think. Because again, if they were considering that, they will put much more workforce in treating the obsolescence.